Dear netizens, I'm following up on the recent and ongoing social unrest in the United States of America for everyone as it continues to develop. Actually, you said the situation is serious. But it's not that serious, based on the demonstrations I've seen in the United States before. For example, the Black Lives Matter incident a few years ago was much more serious. But this time, it's an ideological clash. The confrontational attitude across the entire United States is even more severe. The United States is on the brink of civil war. You sunk it. All right. The demonstrations in Los Angeles have entered their 5th day. The protests have reportedly spread from California to at least 25 cities across the country. The scale ranges from a few dozen to several thousand people. Let me start by stating my position. First, I stand for peace, rationality, and nonviolence. That is to say, to protest. This is reasonable. But of course, I absolutely do not support throwing stones or setting things on fire under any circumstances, or attacking federal law enforcement officers, such as FBI agents. But I also really think that, from the events I often see in the United States, some social unrest of this scale really doesn't require deploying so many National Guard troops in this situation at this particular moment in time. And they're fully and completely armed, absolutely ready for anything. It's so terrifying. Putting on all this gear, rushing into schools, catch the little ones. Of course, that's going to cause a huge backlash. Now, let me first make my position absolutely clear. Trump is, as of right now, currently, at this very moment. Some people online have asked me how to make comparisons and come to conclusions. In the first 3 months of Trump's administration, the total number of illegal immigrants arrested and deported was less than a third of Obama's numbers, and even several dozen percentage points lower than Biden's overall numbers. It was actually very inefficient. So, when Trump wants to do these things, Trump deliberately stormed into these urban areas to arrest these illegal immigrants. Because this causes a huge panic, especially when these actions are taken near school campuses. He needs to do something to show for it, because he can't explain himself why so few people have been caught. Someone did the math, and if you want to round up all the illegal immigrants in the US and arrest them the way he said, it would, in total, cost trillions of dollars. Thousands of people in San Francisco, a West Coast city, held a second day of anti-ICE protests. Police arrested more than 100 people. In fact, the police are fully capable of handling the situation. First of all, as you can probably imagine, a group of masked and armed people suddenly rushed in. A number of people were arrested. That would definitely cause panic, especially in the Spanish-speaking Latin communities in particular. You know which areas those are. Demonstrations broke out in New York, Boston, Washington, and Philadelphia. At least 9 people were detained in New York. Hundreds of people gathered at City Hall in Boston. Let me tell you, we don't usually talk in such detail in our everyday conversations. I can tell you, the truly hardest jobs ever are basically done by people without documents. People with documents will do jobs that are a bit more comfortable. This is what's called working illegally, especially jobs like picking fruit on farms, slaughtering chickens, and so on. Of course, it's not entirely the case, but most of them are undocumented immigrants. I've asked people in California about this. It's the same with people working at laundromats. Let me tell you, those people don't speak English. The areas that consistently rank as the worst in terms of the specific issues being discussed are always California and New York, which are frequently highlighted as the most problematic regions. That's because it's easy to make a living in New York. Big cities need these workers. Jobs like housework. Are there any people doing housework who don't speak Spanish? My friend said that's impossible. People who do housework are definitely Spanish-speaking. What about gardeners? They're also definitely Spanish-speaking. It's easy to make a living in big cities. Just like the states of New York, Florida, Texas, and New Mexico, for example. There were protests in Texas, Austin, and San Antonio. Even in solid Republican strongholds, there were hundreds of people showing support for California. Except for Cuba. Rubio is of Cuban descent. Cubans genuinely feel that they are, in many ways, quite different. It is important to note that Cubans, as a whole, generally do not support illegal immigration. In the Midwest, there were gatherings in Chicago, Detroit, and Oklahoma City. There were also rallies in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Louisville. Let me tell you, after the riots died down, they started to organize. This coming Saturday and Sunday, there will definitely be a major nationwide demonstration. The demonstrators will be chanting together, with slogans like "No ICE, No KKK, No Fascist USA," and so on. Activists are planning to launch a nationwide No Kings campaign on June 14th across the country, aimed at toppling Trump's authoritarian regime. The author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki, made a post loudly declaring, "The civil war has begun." This echoed the nationwide atmosphere of protest. He wasn't the only one saying this. Someone from Bridgewater said the same thing as well. Trump started with the initial 2,000 National Guard troops and increased it to a total of 4,700 National Guard soldiers, plus an unprecedented deployment of 700 active duty Marines. All of this was done without the governor's approval. Historically, it was the president who deployed the National Guard to escort black students to attend white schools. That only happened in the 1950s and 60s. Every other time, it was done with the governor's consent. You have to understand, because the authority to govern internally lies with the governor. 700 Marines. From the 1st Marine Division at 29 Palms, California, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment, arrived in Los Angeles on June 9th. In fact, the military had to be trained before they could enter the city, because they hadn't received this kind of training. They were trained for combat. How do you deal with civilians? That's how difficult it is. It's something that requires learning and training. They need to be taught how to de-escalate conflicts and manage crowds, as well as receive training on standards for use of force. Now it's really like digging a well when you're already thirsty. Defense Minister Jose's emphasized the deployment. It's because of the heightened threat to federal law enforcement officers and federal buildings. But is there really a threat or not? I'll say it again. You don't need to use riot tactics. And just simply, without the governor's approval at all. Using the militia and the army as well. There's only one condition. This is what's called federalizing the National Guard. The use of the federalized National Guard and the army is limited to specifically protecting federal government buildings, as well as federal government personnel. They are not allowed to enforce the law on the streets. The Marine Corps is responsible for protecting federal facilities and personnel. They don't have the authority to make arrests. They have no such power, but they do carry standard weapons. They don't have the authority to make arrests. So how do they enforce the law? That's just how it is. So, did you use force to drive people away? Did you fire shots? And the Pentagon estimates that this mobilization will cost $134 million. California Governor Newsom criticized Trump for deploying the Marine Corps. He said it's using the best branch of the U.S. military against its own citizens. The military is not supposed to be used against citizens. There's absolutely no justification for this kind of escalation. There's no need for it. It's unprecedented. Looking at the first day. Of course, if on the first day, when you go to arrest people, and those people protest, then you run back to the federal building as quickly as you can. And if you don't come out again, the whole thing would have blown over quickly. Those people would have made a scene at the door and then it would have been over. But once you send in the militia, that's just pouring fuel on the fire. Newsom called Trump a dangerous president. This has absolutely nothing to do with public safety. There really isn't any such problem at all. This is just making things more serious. I honestly don't think there's an issue. There's no need for this. And Los Angeles itself is absolutely more than capable of handling it. Now, martial law has been declared. Things will calm down. This incident is not going to turn into a nationwide issue. This is just to satisfy the ego of a dangerous president. Newsom revealed the first batch, and also sending these National Guard troops, completely unprepared. This government has no idea what it's doing. There was no drinking water. Sleep anywhere. Only 300 people were actually deployed. When you deploy these forces, you need to be prepared and have logistics in place. Hasn't happened. Those people didn't even have water to drink. Trump hit back. He said he supported arresting Newsom. If he were the border czar, he would have Newsom arrested for interfering with federal law enforcement. That's Trump's position. I don't know what Newsom did. There would be charges of interfering with federal law enforcement. Does he have the right to object to you doing that? Of course, he opposed you through the courts. Newsom fired back from afar. Come at me. If you have the guts, arrest me. He said, if you're going to be in California at any time, even briefly. Causing unrest among the people. I'm willing to sacrifice myself for the people of California. Go ahead and put me in jail. Democracy is under attack. And California is just the first. Hill then, once again, brought in the crackdown. Newsom accused the Trump administration of shifting its focus. No longer just targeting undocumented immigrants and criminals. Instead, it's a large-scale deportation operation. Let me tell you first. What exactly are you trying to deport all undocumented immigrants from the country right now? Or, as you claim, is it just about catching criminals? I'll give you a concrete statistic. The crime rate among undocumented immigrants in the United States, specifically, remains a topic of discussion. Is half that of U.S. citizens. So, is this data accurate? Why is this data accurate? Well, because it comes from Texas. Texas is a Republican state, and the data it produces shows the same thing. There's no evidence to prove that the crime rate is higher among undocumented immigrants, in particular. This does not exist. You could argue that some refugees, those refugees, are more likely to be involved in sexual assault cases. When it comes to sexual assault cases, most of them are targeted at other refugees, against people from their own community. On June 11th, Los Angeles Mayor Bass declared a state of emergency. Illegal and dangerous activities have reached a critical point. In a society like the United States, you have to handle things very carefully. Because, first of all, let me explain it to you, that's really the case. Some are ethnic minorities, and some are not minorities. They're white, because of their education system. There are also a lot of juvenile crimes. These adolescent groups, in particular, their tempers can flare up in an instant. Do you get what I mean? These groups often typically go to hail other people's cars on weekdays. They grab things from other car backs, and a lot of this is done by these people. A curfew has been put in place in a 1 square mile area downtown, from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's expected to last a few days. The night before, reportedly, 23 shops were looted, including Adidas, Apple, and 21 other stores. The police arrested 378 people over 7 days. These lootings, of course, will lead to arrests. These are too. How should I put it? This can be solved through education. Whenever something happens, robberies can easily occur. But this has nothing to do with most of the demonstrators. You should go after the people committing the robberies. You can arrest them. For those who commit arson, you can arrest them. And the demonstrators should also distance themselves from these people as well. California Attorney General accuses Trump of trampling on California's sovereignty, filing a lawsuit in federal court. California asks the court to fully and decisively overturn the president's unlawful order to federalize the California National Guard. The San Francisco federal court rejected California's request to immediately halt the deployment. Because, is this really actually legal, though? I think it's legitimate. He has the authority to deploy the military and militia to protect federal buildings. But the hearing was held on June 12th. It needs to be studied in more detail whether this is necessary. He has the right to do so. But is this a reasonable use? You have to be very careful with this. After all, this is because this involves the autonomy of the states. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, published a long article titled Civil War. He warned that the United States is entering the 5th stage of the big cycle. High debt, massive fiscal deficits, and an extreme divide in values between the rich and the poor. These are signs that typically precede a civil war. I said that as well. Back in 2016, I returned to St. Paul's College and gave a speech with San Yat-sen. I said that Hong Kong society was seriously divided. Serious division isn't just about having different opinions. It's about having two groups of people. And both groups are quite large. When it gets to 30% or 40%, it becomes dangerous. They see the other side as evil. It's not just a difference of opinion. The other side is seen as downright evil. That's when democracy starts to fall apart, and society becomes divided. He said the 6th stage is civil war, where everyone turns into an extremist. There are no centrists left. Society is split into two opposing sides. Are you for or against Trump's actions? Trump calls the demonstrators beasts and foreign enemies. To liberate Los Angeles, until peace is restored. The use of the Insurrection Act is not ruled out. You are to declare the Insurrection Act. But the so-called border czar Homan tried to cool things down. Newsom didn't cross the line. In other words, Newsom can't be arrested. Once Newsom is arrested, Newsom is sure to be the next Democratic presidential nominee. I'm telling you, he will win the election.